Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at the price of a normal house in a normal neighborhood, and thought, how is anyone actually affording this? Like you're doing the math, you've got a decent income, you're not reckless with money, but somehow every time you get close to what you need for a down payment, the prices move again. The goalpost shifts, and it starts to feel less like a financial problem and more like the game is rigged. Here's the thing. You might be right. Because right now, on the other side of the planet, the Chinese government has spent the last 2 decades building entire cities from scratch. Massive, modern, fully equipped cities with roads and apartments and shopping malls and universities. And almost nobody lives in them. Ordos, Kingbashi, Ujiapu. These aren't movie sets. These aren't abandoned towns. These are brand new cities that cost hundreds of billions of dollars to build, and they're sitting almost completely empty. And I promise you, what's happening in China is not just China's problem. It is directly connected to why you can't afford a house, why your savings feel like they're losing ground, and why the global economy feels increasingly unstable.
So today, we're going to break all of it down.
My name is Zach, and I spend way too much time thinking about how broken real estate markets affect regular people's ability to build wealth. If you're someone who feels like home ownership keeps getting further away no matter how hard you work, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today's video isn't just about China.
It's about understanding the economic machinery that's been running in the background for 30 years, quietly reshaping what property is worth, who gets to own it, and what happens when that machine breaks down.
Okay, let's set the scene. China's economy has grown at a pace that is genuinely hard to comprehend. In 1990, China's GDP was roughly $360 billion. By 2023, it was over $17 trillion. That's not growth. That's a complete economic transformation in a single generation.
And a massive, massive amount of that growth was built on one thing: real estate. Here's what most people don't realize. At its peak, the real estate sector, including construction, property development, and related industries, accounted for somewhere between 25 and 30% of China's entire GDP.
To put that in American terms, imagine if a quarter of everything the entire U.S. economy produced every single year was just houses.
That is a staggering concentration of economic activity in a single sector. And it didn't happen by accident. It happened because of a series of decisions by the government, by developers, and by millions of ordinary Chinese citizens that made perfect sense individually and created a catastrophic problem collectively. Look, to understand the ghost cities, you need to understand how the money actually flowed. In China, the central government controls the big economic levers, but local governments, provinces, cities, counties, are responsible for delivering economic growth in their own regions. And for decades, they were basically judged on one metric: GDP growth. Here's the problem. Local governments in China don't collect income tax the way Western governments do. Their primary source of revenue? Selling land use rights to developers. That's the key mechanism. The government owns the land. Developers pay for the right to use it. And with that cash, local governments fund hospitals, schools, roads, salaries, everything. So here's the incentive structure that emerged. More construction equals more land sales, equals more government revenue, equals more GDP growth, equals better performance reviews, equals career advancement. Every actor in this system was rationally responding to their own incentives. And the output of all those rational individual decisions? Skyscrapers with no tenants, highways with no traffic, apartment towers with no lights on at night. This is where it gets really interesting. Now, you might be thinking, okay, if nobody's living there, why were these apartments being bought in the first place? Because they were being bought. That's the insane part. These ghost city apartments were sold, hundreds of thousands of them, to real buyers with real money. But not to live in. In China, there's a deeply embedded cultural belief that real estate is the safest, most legitimate store of wealth.
It goes back generations, through land reform, through communist-era collectivization, through decades of watching inflation destroy cash savings.
For the average Chinese family, buying an apartment, even a second or third apartment, is not speculation. It's prudence. It's what responsible people do with money. Here's what makes this even more extreme. In China, a man who does not own property is considered, by wide cultural consensus, unfit for marriage. Surveys have shown that over 70% of Chinese women say property ownership is a prerequisite for a serious relationship.
So you have tens of millions of families, particularly in the rapidly urbanizing middle class, who are not just buying property as an investment, they're buying it as a social necessity.
As proof of stability, as the price of admission to a normal life. And developers knew this, and they built accordingly. Here's where the math becomes truly alarming. China's largest property developer, Evergrande, became the most indebted real estate company in the history of the world. At its peak, Evergrande had liabilities exceeding $300 billion. That's not a typo. $300 billion in debt from one company, building apartments.
And Evergrande wasn't alone. Country Garden, Sunac, Kaisa, one by one, China's biggest developers started missing debt payments, restructuring, or collapsing entirely.
Here's the specific math that killed them. In China, developers sell apartments before they're built. Buyers pay upfront, often their entire life savings, for an apartment that exists only on a blueprint. The developer takes that cash, uses it to start building, borrows more to keep going, and sells the next project to pay off the debt from the previous one. This is structurally identical to a Ponzi scheme. Not in the fraudulent sense, everyone knew roughly how it worked, but in the mathematical sense. It only works as long as new buyers keep entering the system. The moment sales slow down, the entire chain collapses. And in 2021, the Chinese government, concerned about exactly this dynamic, introduced what became known as the Three Red Lines policy. Developers who had been running this playbook for 20 years suddenly couldn't borrow anymore, and the Ponzi stopped. Look, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, China has a real estate crisis. Why does that matter to me? Here's why it matters to you, directly. Specifically, point 1. China holds approximately $800 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds. If China's economy continues to destabilize and they need to liquidate foreign assets to manage domestic problems, that selling pressure pushes up U.S. interest rates. Higher U.S. interest rates mean higher mortgage rates. Higher mortgage rates mean even harder for you to afford a house. Point 2. China is the world's largest consumer of construction materials. Cement, steel, copper, glass, all of it. If China's construction sector permanently contracts, and right now it is contracting, global commodity prices shift. That affects the cost of building homes everywhere. Point 3. The psychological lesson. This is the one I really want you to take with you. What happened in China is an extreme version of something that happens in every economy that treats real estate as a guaranteed investment. When you create a system where everyone believes property values only go up, where property is the primary store of wealth, where an entire generation is told, buy now or be priced out forever, you create the conditions for exactly what China is experiencing. The prices become disconnected from the actual utility of the housing, from what it's worth to live in. And at some point, reality reasserts itself. There's a cognitive bias at the center of all of this called recency bias. It's the human tendency to take recent trends and assume they will continue indefinitely into the future. If prices have gone up for 10 years, your brain starts to feel, not just think, feel, like they will always go up. Chinese property buyers weren't irrational. They were looking at 20 years of uninterrupted price appreciation and drawing a completely logical conclusion. This trend will continue. Every single person who bought a tulip bulb in 1637 Dutch Holland was also drawing a completely logical conclusion from recent trends. Every person who bought NASDAQ tech stocks in 1999. Every person who bought Las Vegas condos in 2006. Here's what most people don't realize. The very confidence that a market is safe is often the signal that risk has been underpriced. When everyone agrees something is safe, when the idea of prices falling seems ridiculous, When your parents, your colleagues, your government, and your culture all confirm that buying is always right, that is precisely when you need to slow down and ask, what is the actual math here?
Okay, enough macro doom. Let's talk about what this actually means for how you manage your own money. 3 takeaways, practical ones. Number 1, never let a cultural narrative replace actual math. In China, the cultural narrative was property always goes up. In the West, the narrative is often renting is throwing money away or real estate is always the best investment. These narratives feel true. They have social weight behind them, but they are not substitutes for running the actual numbers on a specific property in a specific market at a specific price at a specific interest rate. Do the math every single time. Number 2. Concentration is the enemy of financial survival. China's economy concentrated 25–30% of its output in a single sector. Many Chinese families concentrated 70, 80, 90% of their net worth in property. When that single sector wobbled, everything wobbled with it. Your job is to build a portfolio where no single asset, sector, or assumption can wipe you out. Diversification isn't glamorous, but it's the difference between a setback and a catastrophe. Number 3, understand the incentive structures around you. China's ghost cities weren't built by evil people. They were built by local government officials responding to career incentives, by developers responding to profit incentives, by buyers responding to cultural and social incentives. Every major financial crisis in history was caused not by villainy, but by incentive structures that made dangerous behavior rational in the short term. Ask yourself, what incentives are shaping the financial advice I'm receiving? Who benefits if I buy? Who benefits if I borrow? Following the incentives is often more useful than following the recommendations. Here's what I want you to take from this.
Those ghost cities in China aren't just a quirky economic footnote. They are the most expensive case study in human history of what happens when an entire society, government, industry, and individuals collectively agrees that one asset class can only go up.
The bill is still being calculated. Millions of Chinese families paid deposits on apartments that may never be finished. Local governments are sitting on debt they cannot service, and the ripple effects are still moving through the global economy right now, in 2024 and beyond. You and I don't control Chinese housing policy. We don't control global interest rates. We don't control what the next economic cycle brings. But we do control whether we understand how these systems work, whether we do our own math, whether we build financial lives that can absorb a shock rather than collapse under one. The people who came out of every major financial crisis with their wealth intact weren't the ones who predicted it. They were the ones who had built portfolios resilient enough to survive being wrong about the timing. Build that, starting now. If this video opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this kind of content. Subscribe if you're not already, because every week we pull back the curtain on exactly these kinds of systems, the ones that quietly shape your financial future, whether you understand them or not. And drop a comment below. I want to know, did you know China's ghost cities existed before this video? And more importantly, does this change how you think about real estate where you live? I'll see you in the next one.